now we'll open it up to some just Q&A, and from a panel perspective, feel free to ask your colleagues from other states direct questions. But the first one that comes to mind, the answer might be short, because you've all referenced where the administration has been, the permatorium, the moratorium. But can you cite specific examples of how the federal government has tried to coordinate with any of the states here and any kind of dialogue? I know one of the main principles now of the OCS Governors Coalition is to improve that dialogue. Are we feeling any of that from a conversation seeking state input now? Or is it more government by fiat a little bit from Washington?
I think there's at least an effort. There's the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Task Force, Coastal Conduit. I'm a member of that the administration put together. I may have been a spin-off or a recommendation of Secretary of Navy Ray Magnus, I'm not sure. And that is an effort to do so. You know, it has the potential to bear fruit, but right now it's more of a scoping meeting at various locations on the coast. But that's more of an environmental effort. As far as trying to get us all together moving forward in production, I don't think there has been anything about moving back to exploration and production like it was before, and it needs to be. And I just want to mention or follow up on something that was pointed out in Virginia. That did sell 200 or 220. I recall in 2007, 2008, when we were talking about drilling and producing offshore as a solution to our energy problems, it was stated then, well, that's not a solution because that will be 5 to 10 years away before it could actually come online. Well, you know, 5 to 10 years is not that far away, and now we've added it, made it not 5 to 10, but 10 to 20. You know, the rhetoric and reality have to intersect at some point.
Yes.
You know, I think one of the things that's important to note, and we did, and I know Texas did, in its lawsuit on the moratorium, is that it's not an option for the federal government. In the OCS Lands Act, the federal statute, that there's a requirement on the need to, where the federal government shall coordinate and discuss with the governors of the OCS states major decisions affecting OCS development. It's a federal law. It's not an option. And that's something that we have certainly tried to underscore with the federal government, that we need that outreach, we need input. But at the end of the day, they got to follow the law, and that's part of the law.
Yeah, and I would just jump in by saying certainly from time to time we get from the Department of Interior those kind of requests to comment. And you kind of get a feeling that it is basically going through the motions and checking off the boxes as opposed to a very vibrant coastal states governors organization sitting at the table pushing back in a very, very, very strong way. You know, there are only 6 coastal states come to mind that have offshore development: Alaska, California, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. And certainly the fact that you are out, you know, working to get 20 states to be a part of it, to me represents a huge opportunity for us to grow the footprint of oil and gas development in offshore America. And as I've said last week when I was speaking, we've come to a time in America's history where what goes on in the Suez Canal is more important than what goes on the Intracoastal Canal. And that's unfortunate, but it's reality.
Dave, let me just make this point. Your question is a very good question. The answer is effectively no. There is no effort by the federal government to try to work with the states to increase production, to do anything beyond what BP has done for cleaning up in the wake of the oil spill. But I will just tell you one person's opinion as I look around at all these people in the oil business. And what the administration is doing now in terms of somewhat returning to permitting is that they're dribbling out enough permits where they can say that they're doing something. Most, not all, are to reopen work that was already being done. There's very little, though some, exploratory wells. But you mark my words, what they're going to try to do is enough to keep the industry from being very vocal. They're going to be enough to try to keep the industry fearing that if the industry complains too loud, that company will get punished. to say, if you're good boys, we might let you have a little bit more. But that this is a pure political calculation of how much do they have to put out there to keep the industry quiet and to not get the blame for $4 gasoline, which they are trying to blame on the industry. And of course, their solution is, well, let's just stick them with $80 billion more of taxes, and that'll solve the problem of the cost of gasoline. Of course, what it'll do is drive up the cost of gasoline, because you know who's going to pay it. Exxon not going to pay it. Exxon's customer is going to pay it at the pump. But I do think, in terms of what you're talking about, we shouldn't kid ourselves. They're going to try to keep people from complaining about what they're doing that reduces production enough that they don't get the political blame.
Anyone else? Well, Commissioner Sullivan, related to that with Alaska, and with the understanding that $4, $4.50 a gallon gasoline is making an impact. Citizens are paying attention to it. The administration is getting some blowback. Clearly, the administration, I agree with Governor Barber here, is trying to put that on industry by and large. What are some of the specific barriers that are standing in the way between development of the Chukchi and the Beaufort? And how can industry and citizens, frankly, get more involved and try to break that barrier down? Because it seems to me, from an administration standpoint, a positive signal on U.S. energy policy sends global markets a very good signal that we're serious about our energy policy. We use 1/4 of the world's energy demand as it is. If we're serious about it, it seems to me that could help some of the high price environment we see right now. And the fastest way to do that, I would think, is the world-class resources available north of Alaska. So what are those barriers?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because if you look from the perspective globally, there, in many ways, if you look at other Arctic countries, in the United States is an Arctic country. Alaska is part of the United States, and we are an Arctic country. You see that there, in many ways, is a rush to be exploring and looking at the huge potential in the Arctic. And the only place that that's not occurring is offshore Alaska. It's very important to remember, and what happened in terms of the Arctic moratorium, we had actually we intervened as a state to defend the exploration plans of Shell and to defend the then MMS decision to allow for exploration. And this was in May of 2010. This is after McConaughey, where we won a lawsuit. So we were moving forward with the federal government at the time, and then literally on the day of the announcement of the Gulf moratorium, there was a paragraph that bootstrapped all of Alaska into that moratorium. And so it was obviously something that was a huge disappointment for us. But there is a focus globally, and as I mentioned, the USGS has estimated that of all the reserves off the different countries, Russia, Canada, Norway, by far the biggest prospective source of oil is off the coast of Alaska. So I think just understanding that there is a lot of focus on this. We recently had the head of the Coast Guard in Alaska is retiring. He has made much in terms of speeches about that just beyond the 200-mile limit, you have other countries, the Chinese in particular, that are very actively looking for resources right off our coast. So everybody's doing it. Everybody sees that as somehow benefiting their country, and yet somehow we don't view it as a potential benefit to our own country. So I think with regard to specifics, we had a moratorium. The state of Alaska sued the Department of Interior on that. They now say they're moving, even though before the Secretary and others declared that there was an Arctic moratorium. And one of the big problems we've also seen is the jurisdiction of the EPA with regard to how long it takes for air permits. It's very different. The system is very different from the way it is in the Gulf, where air permits are issued by the Department of Interior, I believe, pretty regularly, pretty quickly. Again, we have companies that haven't been able to drill one exploratory well because of now air permit issues. We would actually like to see that timeline be sped up and have some certainty to it. And again, more certainty with regard to the permitting, because this is a resource that is in very shallow water, unlike the Gulf, and we think can be explored safely in an environmentally responsible way and can have huge positive impacts for America's energy security.